Episode 39, Worst Visual Effects in Cinema.
Welcome to the Visionary Variety Podcast, where we cover cool stuff like photo, video, film, books, and technology. So, switch on your brain and enjoy the show.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. This week we are going to be kind of doing a part 2 to episode 37, where we talked about the best visual effects in cinema. This time we're doing the opposite. We're going to be talking about the worst visual effects in cinema. The, cringy, like how did they spend money on this? Who said, yes, this is fine to be in a Hollywood blockbuster film? It's just so confusing, honestly.
Yeah, very much so.
A lot of these are just like, why? Who? How? But we'll get to that more in a second. So I am Daniel Grove, one of the hosts of this show, and we have with us a returning guest, Abby Leon.
Hey, how you guys doing? Nice to be back.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you back. Honestly, I wish we could have you on every episode if our schedule permitted.
Yeah.
But this is definitely something up your alley, but since you are such a cinemaphile, and I mean, we all love movies, especially me. And like I said in episode 37, I have just had this ongoing love and sometimes hate relationship with special effects. As a kid, they mesmerized me. I wanted to know how they were done. I wanted to know why some of them were awful and some of them were incredible. And, as I grew up and learned more about movies, learned more about special effects, photography, videography, I learned how things were done and the reason why some of them failed. So we're going to be talking about the fails in this episode. And I do have to give a little disclaimer. There was real people that worked on these projects, people that spent years sometimes and countless hours working on these cinema scenes and trying to make them as best as they could. Honestly, a lot of times these failures of cinema is really due to business decisions. A lot of times they had cut time schedules, they had cut budgets. The director or someone comes and says, hey, we got to have this finished by next month. Do whatever you have to get this ready. And that's unfair to the artists who are involved with these things. So I'm not insulting the people who did this, but there were definitely some bad decisions made. They're usually not the fault of the visual effects people.
Yeah.
So with that being said, Abby, how's your week been? Anything interesting going on?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's just been Murphy's week for me. Just had some problems with my car, had problems with my laptop even before tonight. Just all over the place. A little bit behind in work, but that's to be expected because I'm recovering from an illness I had 2 weeks ago. It's just kind of one of those life things when it all hits at once, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
But we're here now and ready to give you guys some good content. So I'm excited about.
Glad to hear you're kind of on the upward curve of all this crap. Well, my week has been pretty good. Today, I actually went to Alamo City Comic-Con with Nate, and I went for the purpose of photographing random people that I don't know, which is kind of different. Normally, when I go to the convention to do photo shoots of cosplayers, I have everything preset, schedules, times, locations. I know who I'm shooting and when and where, and that's it. I have a very strict schedule. But this time I was like, I've never done a convention at the Alamo Dome, which is the venue that this con was at. It's not exactly a photo-friendly place like the normal convention center that we have events at. So I didn't want to, put any money on the line on anything. So I just said, I'll just show up. I'll find people that look cool. I'll take pictures and I'll send it to them for free. So I was only there for about 3 hours, but it went really well. I photographed 26 different cosplayers, made some really cool connections, met some interesting people. And the photos already look great. I can't wait to start editing them tonight and make some cosplayers very happy in the next following weeks.
Yeah, I hope that turns out really well for you, man. You do really great work in that arena.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks. It's so much fun. Sometimes it's a labor of love because honestly, I pour hours into these photos, and I'm not making a dime on some of them. So, but it's okay. I've got an awesome portfolio, and it's because I spent a lot of time working on stuff. And it's really fun art, and it's a great expression of my creativity. And I'm glad I found that outlet for it because for years I was always just wondering, like, how can I be more creative? How can I make photos that stand out? And I finally found my thing. So I'm just rocking and rolling with it.
Are we allowed to say anything about some of your upcoming opportunities that we spoke about earlier? Or is that?
Yes, I They didn't tell me I couldn't say anything, so I'm going to say something.
Yeah,
uh,
this is some really great news, man. I'm really happy for you for this.
So there is a production company. I don't know what else to call them, but one of the names they go by is 60-second docs or 60-second documentaries. And this is a group or a company or a team. I don't know what exactly to call them, but they make 1 minute documentaries, just like their name implies. And they cover all kinds of creative people, performing artists, unique individuals that
Hmm.
did something great with their
Yeah.
time and their skills. And it looks like from what I've looked through their website and their YouTube is that I might be the very first photographer. As of right now, 60 Second Docs wants to do a documentary about me, which is like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been on the news before, but honestly, as far as exposure and reach out to the bigger world, this is way bigger than public news on TV. On Facebook alone, their videos go super viral. And I mean, I was looking at some of them and they get an average of 1 to almost 2 million views.
Wow, that's a lot, man.
Yeah, it's a lot of viewage, and that's super exciting. So I know ultimately most of it's not going to be local, but you know what? That's still going to bring me some traffic and some interest, and
Hmm.
you just don't know. The sky's the limit when you have that much reach. You just don't know who you're going to be,
Yeah.
who's going to be watching your videos.
I got a new hard drive for my laptop. That's about it. No.
That's a pretty big deal.
That's a big
Can't work without that.
that's just about a big a deal as I had this week. And no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, man, that's awesome. I've watched your viewership and your just your client base just grow from back in the day. It's about four
Hmm.
years ago, whatever. And it's just real
Oh,
exciting.
totally.
It's real exciting to
Yeah.
watch a friend just blow up like that.
Yeah, it's just, it's like the way I picture building momentum for your company is you're always pushing forwards and you're kind of making a snowball and you got to keep pushing. If you quit, it's going to roll backwards and you're going to lose it really quick if you get lazy and stagnant or non-creative with your
Hmm.
work. But if you keep pushing over an extended amount of time, you keep things fresh, you keep challenging yourself, trying new things, and, of course, catering to your viewers, like eventually things will start to carry themselves and big avenues will open up or small avenues will open to bigger ones. Because honestly, the way that I was found by 60 Second Docs is they found me from a podcast that featured me, which was the Side Hustle School podcast.
Mm,
And
right.
from that podcast featuring me, another another side hustle podcast found me, which was Hustle to Freedom. And so they also had me because of that first podcast. So that very first podcast, feature got me these two things.
That's
And
awesome.
it's just sort of how it works, it just kind of grows and grows and
Did I mention that I got a new hard drive this week? No, I'm just- yeah, dude, that's so cool, man.
This just in.
This just in. That's awesome, dude.
Attention.
That
Dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee.
it's all. It really is. That's talent and skill and all that stuff take you so far. But it really is to take a word from those last two plugs is it really is about your hustle, man. Just getting your
Mhm.
hands into as many pies as you can, I guess, and
Yeah. There's a little bit of luck involved, but you
yeah,
won't get to that lucky
if
stage
you're not
unless you
doing
put in the hard
yeah,
work.
exactly. So that shows a lot about your ethic, and just keep working, just keep working at
Mhm.
it. And yeah, but in all seriousness, just today I picked up a side gig that's adding to my base income for the year in the several thousands of dollars per year. So but that's because people know what I do as far as video work,
Mhm.
as far as technology is concerned, and I it's no there's no shame in telling people what you do, and if and not necessarily soliciting yourself in the sense of business, but just telling people, hey, yeah, I do this. If you ever need help with anything, just let me know, and
Mhm.
we'll square away afterwards or whatever that looks like. I mean, life really is about networking. I was actually just listening to a podcast. Um, some of you that listen to this and know who I am might know that due to PTSD, I've had mental issues, and this is not what this podcast is about. But my point is that I was listening to this podcast, and they were talking about that humanity has only survived because we're tribal by nature. In other words, we're meant to be part of groups.
Mhm.
Like you and I are into podcasting and are into technology, and we relate in that group. And so one of the cures, this guy was saying that one of the cures for depression is getting yourself into groups that interest you and
Yeah.
finding those tribes. And unless you're doing that, you're not going to be able to excel in life.
Hmm.
So, you've found this hustle has led you to a lot of different pies per se, or a lot of different tribes, a lot of different
Yeah.
network groups that.
I always tell new photographers, you can't just sit alone and try to
Mhm,
learn and become great all on your own. You got to find Facebook groups,
mhm,
find local friends,
yeah,
like do photo shoots with other photographers. Like
mhm.
that community is so crucial and you're growing.
It is. It is. And so that's one of the reasons I appreciate you guys, inviting me on to the show. I think this is like my fourth time, maybe
Yeah, third or
fourth
fourth.
or
I
fifth,
was trying
something
to
like
count,
that.
but
Yeah, but because it's fun. I think here in the near future I might have my own, and I'll invite you onto my
ooh.
podcast
Ooh.
just because it's something that's fun. It's a good outlet to.
Yeah.
Everybody has an opinion, and might as well just start one. If you have one, just tell the world about it. I mean,
You have a good
if
opinion.
you have a good opinion,
Start a podcast.
I think a
If your voice isn't annoying.
well articulated opinion is more important, because you could have opposing views. You could have an opposing view to
Hmm.
me, and I think it's dumb. But if you're well articulated and informed, I'll listen to you. Otherwise,
I
yeah.
mean, the earth is flat, but I don't have to prove
Oh
myself.
my
So,
gosh. So, worst movie effects. Speaking of,
anyway, speaking, yeah,
speaking of
there we
worst
go. What
movie
a great
effects, I
segue.
don't know if that would ever.
Speaking of fake stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to start mine off with Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope. And this is not the original, but this is the special edition that was made in 1997 when 3D graphics were so great. They just thought that they needed to insert
Oh,
a 3D Jabba the Hutt into a scene that was not used in the original film, that was filmed back in the 70s.
I remember this. Oh
Throw some
man.
spice in there. So, yeah. So Steve Williams is an awesome guy that works in visual effects, and he was hired to do the animation for the Jabba, the CGI Jabba the Hutt that they inserted. And get this, originally, when they filmed the movie, there was a stand-in, at least in this scene, there was a character for Jabba the Hutt that was a human. Like he had a costume and everything during the filming. Did you know that?
In the original one, like in the practicals.
Yeah, like they
Okay.
had, this is when they had not yet decided what Jabba would look like.
I think I
And
remember that. Yes. Uh-huh.
mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if the footage is released without the CGI. I never saw that, surprisingly, but I did see pictures of the actor. He's an Irish guy,
Hmm.
and yeah, he had a full on costume and everything. He was just kind of a big, kind of a crime lord looking dude, I
I
guess.
think they used that was the inspiration for the guy on Jakku that Ray. You remember that Ray would sell her junk to?
Yeah.
I think
Huh.
that was the inspiration for that guy. But anyways, go
Interesting.
ahead.
They took that clip that was shot and they overlaid CGI Jabba the Hutt, which looked pretty bad. And there's just a bunch of weird things about this scene.
Hmm.
So Steve Williams that did the animation for this scene, he also worked on Jurassic Park, Terminator 2, and also The Mask, which is an awesomely underrated movie.
Yeah.
And he was busy with these really big, well done CGI scenes, and I just feel like they did not quite put the effort into the Star Wars scene at this time, because he just had other bigger, more money making projects. You can find a really cool interview with him on VFXblog.com about this scene, and he honestly says that it didn't look good. He knows. He's not like, yeah, it was great. He knows what's wrong with it. But in the
Oh
scene, you
man.
see this canning. There's a panning camera shot that follows along the side of the Millennium Falcon, where Han is walking next to Jabba the Hutt, and Jabba's kind of like slithering along because he kind of moves like a snake, apparently. And there's this weird effect you can see on YouTube if you find this shot, where you can see this weird cloning distortion of the background, because this is where I guess they had to remove part of the actor, and they were cleaning up where the actor body was in the real clip, and they were putting over the CGI, Jabba the Hutt, and it's like this weird warping. I don't know how to explain it, but you just need to find this scene and watch where they're doing the walking scene along the side of the Millennium Falcon, and don't look at the actors, but look at the Falcon itself right behind Jabba's head. It's weird. It's like they did some crazy, movie magic at the time, but right now we're like, oh, it looks bad.
Yeah, that was horrible.
Yeah, and on top of that, there was really bad lip syncing, which again, this was revolutionary at the time. They had not really done any 3D character lip syncing at the time. There was Dragonheart being made, and there was some new technology that they had made for that, for the Sean Connery's dragon voice, which was awesome. yeah, so lip syncing was not quite there. They were trying to make up plugins and make up scripting to make it look good. So they did their best, but there just was not a lot to build on at the time. The worst part to me, though, that I have, even as a kid, I knew this was bad. Han walked originally behind the actor in the clip that was
Right.
shot,
Uh-huh.
but Jabba has a big old fat tail back there. So Han can't just walk through his body. They had to make him step up on his tail and go down, and it looks awful. They literally cut Han Solo's body out. They animated it as moving up with a step and then bouncing back down to ground level when he steps off of Jabba's tail, and Jabba goes, whoa, because he stepped on his tail. Which probably a bad idea to step on a huge, gangster lord's tail.
Yeah.
But it looks really bad. Oh. Now, in 2004, there was another more special edition re-released where they redid a number of CGI scenes with much better CGI, and that Jabba Hutt is pretty good. I mean, I don't have too much complaints. I didn't watch that scene a lot, but it is, miles, light years, if you will, ahead of the '97 version.
It looks more like the practical puppet Jabba.
Yeah, that's what they. Yeah, they made it look more like the movie.
Yeah,
with the practical effects of Jabba, like the puppet. So
yeah. No, I was just gonna say the actor's name was Declan Mulholland.
yes,
And
thank you.
Yeah, just nerd stuff. That's all.
Another thing that I noticed that was really cringy about that scene with the CGI Jabba was that Han is standing so close to him in one shot. Like his crotch is literally up against Jabba the Hutt. He's so close. It's like, ugh, what is happening here? Why would you do that? No.
Yeah.
Back up.
That's
there's no personal bubble there, and it looks really bad.
Yeah, that is very bad. I just don't understand. I'm watching the gifs and I'm like, oh my gosh, what were they thinking? And then just that Jabba looks so I don't even know. Like, was the guy blind? I have no clue because it looks absolutely nothing. It looks like a frog that they just like literally flattened on the celluloid. It's like, let's just press this frog up against the film and then oh, it was just bad.
Have you seen that GIF or meme of like that ugly frog cartoon face?
Yeah.
It's got like really big nostrils. I don't understand the context or even the story or behind that meme. I've seen it everywhere, but I saw a raw CGI face shot of the Jabba model that they use that they animated, and it looks just like that frog meme.
Oh man, no, I haven't seen that. I'm gonna see if I can look it up.
Maybe I'll make a side by side and post it on the Facebook page because it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's it for my first entry in this list of worst visual effects.
My first entry is you can't deny this is because I really liked the first couple movies.
Oh, so good.
The first was it the first two that were good, right? And then the Scorpion King was number 3.
Oh yeah.
And it had Dwayne the Rock Johnson in it, and
poor guy.
And when
he's still trying to forget this scene.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know what to say about it. I mean, I can't. I think we were talking before the show. It's worse than like PlayStation 2 graphics. It's so bad. And I remember watching it, and he does that The Rock eyebrow.
Yeah, they faked it.
Oh my gosh, they faked. I'm like, they could. I don't even understand. You started to mention, about decisions, like what kind of decision making was happening when they said move forward with this graphic. Everything. You could just Google the Mummy Scorpion King, and there isn't a single good image of this thing. I mean, it's stuff that beginners in CGI learn how to do. I mean, the bump mapping on it was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
The rigging was horrible. It didn't move naturally. The textures of the color, it didn't even look like skin.
The mesh itself didn't have the right shape of a human face. It was kind of flat.
It was weird. It was really, really weird. Yeah, it was. It just everything about it. There wasn't a single thing. The hair, the
scorpion body was kind of decent. Like the legs moving, everything up till you get to the torso piece.
Yeah, the stuff that matters. Yeah,
the human element.
Everything that it would just. Nope, it doesn't work. I can't say anything. Well, I don't know, because I think you're so encapsulated by how ugly the CGI was that I didn't even notice how okay the rest of the Scorpion was.
Yeah, you don't even look
You
there.
don't even look. It's like, what's
Just in
going on
awe.
here? It's like one of those rubbernecking at an accident. It's like you can't take your
Yeah.
eyes off of the bad part. It's like,
Can't look.
what is this? Um, it was just bad in every respect. And um, I couldn't tell you anything good about it. I mean, because the story looked like it was headed in a good direction.
Hmm.
Like you watch it and you're like, okay, all right, it's going somewhere. And then they drop the Scorpion King CGI dude, and it's like,
I wonder if that was a different team than the first movies, because I remember like the mummy effects were incredible.
yeah,
They're still holding up today.
yes, they do.
And the scarabs, that was a really great, well done.
Yeah, the scarabs.
Like they had smart people.
I could probably look up who the supervisor was for that, but um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it just goes back to what you said. It's just like what kind of decision making was happening at that time when they said, "Yeah, let's do it." Well,
Hmm.
okay, so I'm looking at the year, and the year was 2002, which
Ooh.
interestingly enough is when some of the other movies that I was uh that are on my list for worst movies came out.
It's a
Um,
bad year for
it was a
CGI.
2002 to 2004 was horrible for CGI, and I think that was because of the advent of better computing for
Hmm.
CGI. One other movie that's just on my short list. I don't want to go into it, but just the rubbery rigging of the first couple Harry Potter movies.
Mm.
I mean, the story trumps it all, so you don't even notice how bad the visuals of some of the characters are. But when like they're flying in the Quidditch match or they're doing their flying for the first time, I mean, it looks so rubbery. It's just
Yeah.
bad. And I remember thinking that when I saw the movie, it was just like didn't take the it was a fledgling movie, so I could forgive that in the Harry Potter series. But
Mm.
the Scorpion King, it was the third iteration of the movie. It had no excuse. So in the last episode, we talked about the best, and one of the best ones that are on the top of my list was The Matrix. And
Mm.
unfortunately, the sequels to The Matrix, Reloaded and Revolutions,
Mm.
they're on the
Yeah.
worst. They're on my worst list.
Yeah. There were some bad scenes in there.
That's actually my technically my second entry for that. I have a little bit more to talk about that because
Hmm.
the visual effects supervisor for the original Matrix is a guy named John Gata, and up until the Matrix, I mean, he had done some really really great stuff, and he still actually he has since then he's done some decent things, but in 2003 when he did Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions, um, I don't know what happened. I think because they went from doing some really cool practical stuff in the original Matrix movies with the practical cinematography. We talked about the
Hmm.
bullet time, right?
Yeah.
Um, to where I think it was just this advent of just supercomputing that happened in the early 2000s that
Yeah.
they decided to
They
take
just kind of
advantage.
jumped the
They
gun.
jumped the gun, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that in 2002, when they were first developing this technology or first mainstreaming this technology, the producers behind the mummies like, oh, I heard this guy, he's doing blah blah blah. Let's let's take advantage of this, and it wasn't
Yeah.
ready. And
Mm.
and in
She
prepping
wasn't ready.
and in prepping for this, you asked us the question like, why do you think that they did this? Well, you
Yeah.
mentioned again, and I'll reiterate, um, cutting corners on budgets, but I think, they really just jumped the gun on this technology. Wasn't fully developed. They
Mm.
used the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man. They used it on the Harry Potter series, the first couple movies. They used it on Scorpion King, and they used it on Matrix Revolutions and Reloaded. And all of these movies came out around the same time frame, 2002 to 2003, 4.
Interesting. Huh.
And they just were pushing the technology
Yeah.
beyond its capabilities. Now, that isn't to say that there isn't some cool uses of the technology in those movies.
Hmm.
I think they're, like you mentioned, the body of the scorpion looked great. Well, I didn't notice it. but the rigging is so bad in Scorpion King, and some of the weird flight and fighting scenes in The Matrix Reloaded,
Mm-hmm.
that it's just like, what's going on here? Because there's
Like when he's fighting all the Agent Smiths. Is that what
yeah,
you're talking
that
about?
one
Yeah.
exactly. Yes, that was horrible.
The big problem with those scenes was the texture. Everything felt too smooth and perfect. Like his coat was like just too like perfect.
Okay.
Their skin textures were very clean. Like they had a lot of makeup on.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't look. When you want to make CGI look real, you actually have to introduce problems into it because real world footage has problems. There's things that are out of focus. There's motion blur. There's dirt and wrinkles and texture that we just take for granted because we're used to it every day. But when you're making something in CGI, things start off perfectly, exactly perfect, and you have to imperfect them to make them look real. And they didn't do that enough.
What's interesting about that exact sentiment is that in the original Matrix movie, Agent Smith says that when we first created the simulation, he said everything was a paradise. And if you remember, he says, and whole systems, he said whole farms of humans, died and went to waste because and he said you need imperfection and you need struggle and strife and death in your so to that point, we need to see imperfections in order for it to look real to us. Yeah, that's actually is kind of deep right there.
Can I go off on the side tangent on Matrix worldview?
Sure, right.
This is super deep. I might blow your mind if I can even word this right, but I listened to a really in-depth podcast where they were talking about the whole movie series as all together, the trilogy, and they basically said that, and this is revealed in the movie, that in the movie we see Neo in the Matrix. That is actually the seventh iteration of the universe made by God, basically, or the program rather, and not God, but like the digital God who created the simulations. Yeah, the architect. Thank you. So he makes the simulation for the pod humans to be happy and generate them electricity. But he realized, like you said, that perfection was not the best way to go. There had to be problems and imperfections and, even, I guess, maybe even suffering and stuff like that. So what they did was he allowed there to be people who would break out of the system, and that Zion was actually like a safe holding place to keep all these rebels kind of at bay and help have them believe that they're reaching freedom. But really, they're just allowed to exist in the system to keep things in balance, which is less like deep.
It is. That's
like, whoa.
Yeah, it's basically humanity defined by its suffering. Yeah, that's there you go. That's an idea for a podcast right there, man. That's
yeah. If I can like really catch up on that and understand it, maybe I would love to do a Matrix podcast. That'll be awesome.
Yeah, simulacra and simulation is what it's called.
Oh, cool.
Because that's what it's one of those prior to Nietzsche, I think, one of those great philosophical thoughts about, do we live in a simulation? Is this a simulated world being defined? How do we define humanity? We define it by our imperfections. And so now let's look at our art. How do we define beautiful art? Well, things that we hold most dear as far as art is concerned is the stuff that's most eclectic. Take Pollock, the Pollock paintings. I mean, it's just a disarray of drippings, but people find it glorious. Look at Picasso and his cubism and all that stuff, and it's like, oh, that is so intriguing. And then you look at Banksy and some of the modern street art, and it's real disturbing content, but people are drawn to it. It's really an interesting facet to what draws our interest. But Scorpion King is not one of them. To bring it back.
It's not a pinnacle of human art in existence.
Yeah. And so to finish my thought on the Matrix is John Gaeta, who was the visual effects supervisor for the Matrix. He did some really cool stuff leading up to it. Let's see. What Dreams May Come. It was a movie that's.
Oh my gosh, that movie is amazing.
He was the
blew my mind.
He was one of the reality capture supervisors for that.
They made plugins to simulate paint.
Yeah.
for the scene where they're running through the paint
Yeah.
fields of flowers. They like made software for that, and it looks incredible still. Like I'm looking at, it, I'm like, how did they make this?
Yeah.
I can't grasp it.
And so then he comes into his Matrix thing, and I guess you throw $1 million at him, or 10 million, or whatever that is, and more money, more problems, you know? Because even after Matrix Revolutions, after he finished that, he was the visual effects supervisor for Speed Racer. Again, great.
I want to see that. I've been meaning
You
to see
haven't
that.
seen it?
No, there's a second one coming. Did you know that?
No, it's a great concept,
Yeah.
but it was. I like the Matrix. I think it was ahead of its time, and it's
Yeah.
so psychedelic in nature that it was not received well at all. They made it too much like the anime. It's like they were trying to do live action anime, and it just didn't.
That's brave.
Yeah, it didn't work.
Yeah.
The story was there, but the visuals weren't. Which interestingly, the next thing he did a cool ninja movie, but that wasn't with the Wachowskis. In
What is
2015,
that?
he did another movie called Jupiter Ascending, which was back
Oh, yeah.
which was back to form as far as his visual effects designing goes. And so I don't know what happened to him in 2003, and just from 2003 to 2008, it was just horrible. Just a string of bad visual effects. I think it was just like I'm
Yeesh.
saying, he was trying to push the envelope too far. Technology wasn't there,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, my first one is the Scorpion King. The second one is a follow up to one of the greatest visual effects that I've ever witnessed in a film and experienced, is The Matrix, which would be the Matrix trilogy, or the Matrix sequels, Reloaded and Revolutions. I don't know what happened there. I really don't.
You know what scenes I did? Now we're kind of getting out of the theme of this episode, but the scenes that I was very impressed with was in the third one. The squid drones those are beautifully done, and also the mechs when the guy's inside the mech and shooting and doing that war scene. Wow, that scene was cool.
But here's what they did with those that they didn't do with the other ones. Whereas some of the stuff that's awkward is all based in a computer, and then they animate everything, digitally. What they did with the mechs and with the
That was
drones,
a mix of practical.
they were actually, they built them practically first. They built them practically, then they modeled them. So it is backwards. So that says a lot about using practical effects. I mean, even if your end product is going to be digital, if you build it tangibly, and if you have it in your hands, that probably just helps to walk out that process a whole lot better, because you have something tangible that you're manipulating, and then you're digitizing it. I don't know how to the phrasing. It's not coming out right, but yeah. They built those models first, and
Can I have one of them?
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
I want that
Well, we
mech in
both
my
have
living room.
we both have friends that do 3D printing. I'm sure we could probably get one done.
Yeah. All right. Well, my next thing here is Ultraviolet. It was a 2006 movie. It was a action-packed, wild sci-fi adventure with one of my favorite actresses, Mila Jovovich. She was from Fifth Element. She was from Resident Evil. I mean, just all
It's from
around.
Blue Lagoon from back in the 80s. Oh, sorry,
Well,
that's
really?
I think I'm telling.
No.
I think
What?
she wasn't she?
Wasn't her.
Well, Brooke Shields was in one of them, but I think she was. I'm gonna look it up.
Mila Jovovich was too young for
Return.
that one.
No, she was in Return to Blue Lagoon, 1991.
Oh, a sequel?
Yeah.
They got lost again?
I don't know. Maybe it was another. I have no
That's
clue.
hilarious. I know the sequel. Yeah, so I love Mila Jovovich. She's beautiful. She's a good actress. She is a great, performer as far as like physical feats of martial arts. I don't know if she is a martial artist or a dancer. I would definitely believe either of them, because the stunts that she does in Ultraviolet are quite impressive. So this movie is a very stylized sci-fi. Yeah. Anyway, so the problem that I have with this movie is that the special effects, it turns out that it has been basically public knowledge that they did not get to finish the visual effects. So now that there's green screen still in there, or, things are like low quality visually, but the details that go into making a composite scene look real, they didn't have time to perfect and round things out. If you just look up ultraviolet special effects sequences on YouTube, you will see some very cringeworthy scenes that you can tell like they could have perfected these things. They could have made them smoother. One of them is she's driving, I think, up the side of a building somehow with this just normal looking motorcycle. Or maybe she launches off the top of another building. Anyway, she comes careening out of the air and lands on top of another building. And that landing is just like wrong. It jumps straight to the ground. There's no bounce. There's no physics. It was just really awfully keyframed composite pieces coming together into one scene. And it is really cringeworthy. There's a number of other sequences where, like I said, she's riding sideways somehow on a motorcycle on the side of a building and shooting people. I mean, she's just shooting everywhere and somehow hitting people in the head. There's a cool effect that they used where the gun comes together in her hand. Like she puts her hand out and it like forms out of, I don't know, her bracelet, or she's holding the handle and the rest of the gun like materializes. That's pretty sweet. But that's a very macro kind of effect. That's easy to make look cool because it's just literally squares and polygons forming into a completed model. Like that's easy in CGI. But moving, using a footage of a real person on a motorcycle, adding 3D background, making things move and, fly, and there's depth going on. There's a lot happening. And they really did push the envelope. Like they did a lot of CGI work. Most of the backgrounds are fake for the action sequences, at least. And in the behind the scenes, you can see, they're just driving their motorcycle like on large sets with totally greened out buildings with dots all over them for 3D tracking. And they were doing a lot in 2006, and I just don't think that they were ready. But this is one of the classic cases where they had director choices being made, or possibly producer decisions being made that cut the production timeline shorter than it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
So originally the movie was 120 minutes long.
Oh.
They cut it down to 88 minutes. That's a lot to trim out.
Yeah, almost 40 minutes of footage.
Yeah, and it was, I think, an R rating at 120 minutes, but they for some reason they had to have it PG-13. So I don't know what they cut out, but
to expand their base, their viewer base. I mean, if you could do that, then
they wanted young teenagers to see it.
Yeah, you can make more. You can make some more of your horribly decided on budget money back.
Yeah, maybe that was it. They're like, oh crap, this thing's gonna bomb. We need to open up to a bigger market.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they knew that was a smart decision, but I don't think it saved them. Another thing about this movie that I noticed was the gun fu that the character does. And if you have seen Equilibrium, you know what gun fu is.
Yes, it's great
kung fu with guns in your hand.
Okay, so we're not talking about best movies, but that's actually, I loved that movie.
It's a sweet movie.
It was really sweet. Yeah, it was really well done. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, so this movie has a lot of action tropes that were cool at the time, and visually they're interesting, but the CGI was not quite there to back it all up. And unfortunately, I feel bad for these VFX teams when they get the email or the memo, hey, we need to have this done by Saturday. That'd be great. And they've got to cut all kinds of corners.
Got those TPS reports.
Yeah, that'd be great. So, having to cut corners and speed things up in CGI is not ideal. It takes time to perfect these things, and it takes time to render and then say, oh, that keyframe was bad. Go back and, fix it and then re-render it. Oh, that render is going to take 3 days. Stuff. This renders take a lot of time, especially when they're high level and they're high resolution, and when the computing was running on Pentiums at the time, probably. It was not easy, so yeah, it's pretty cringy. I would probably still want to watch this movie just so I can say I watched it for these ridiculous over-the-top action sequences, but it might be hard to finish.
That's what I kept reading in the reviews and in some of the Reddit threads, was that if you don't think about it, it's actually some pretty mind-bending sequences if you don't think about it. But once you start like trying
it's hard for me to do.
Yeah, once you start trying to, be semi-objectionable objective, to like, wait a second, what is going on here?
She just flew through a flying helicopter in her motorcycle, shot people while flying, and then landed and shot more people.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's one of those, I think there was a period in the early 2000s where I'm thinking that producers just thought, okay,
We can do anything.
Yeah, and let's see if we can let's see how we can one up each other as
Yeah.
far as sequences is concerned. Like outlandish super. I think it's actually
Yeah,
what
they're
led to
crazy.
it was a precursor to the superhero genre. It's like let's how outlandish can we get and how much
Mhm.
can we get away with to where finally they said, you know what, enough's enough. No, stop. Let's ground this a little bit in reality, which is what Christopher
Yeah.
Nolan did with his superhero stuff. It's like, no, that you guys have pushed it too far. It doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
Let's
Gotta wait for
reboot.
computers to catch up
Yeah,
and give it like you need to have a purpose behind using CGI. You can't just use it for eye candy and have a sweet trailer and to draw attention to your movie. That's recipe for failure
yeah, and
when you're
it
using just because.
is a recipe for failure. And I mean, all you have to do is go to Box Office Mojo or IMDb and
Mhm.
just see how these movies have essentially tanked at both
Yeah.
the critics and the audience.
You know, it'd be a fun episode in the future is if we went to Rotten Tomatoes and just kind of picked out like one of the worst movies
And
and
watched
did a
it.
movie review.
Ooh, I like that idea. And then film our reactions.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
That would be interesting. I feel like so many shots in Ultraviolet are just like a modeling portfolio of Mia Jovovich. Like there's so many close-ups and she's not saying or doing much and she looks beautiful. She's got this cool hair. And I was like, why are there so many close-ups and why is she like literally doing ballet with guns in her hands?
Yeah.
Well, that's it for our official, worst VFX. In our small, limited opinion, I'm sure there are tons of other movies that we could have mentioned that, I'm sure our listeners probably have in their mind. We don't have time to do them all. We just want to pick out a few that were fun to make fun of and that we could find actual information on.
Yeah.
But we do have a few kind of dishonorable mentions.
Yeah.
Not honorable mentions, but dishonorable mentions that we just want to throw out there because they're worth mentioning, but either we didn't have time to really go into the depth behind them, or really, I think in most cases, there just wasn't a lot of behind the scenes information as to why these things were done so badly. Or interesting tidbits because sometimes there's a lot of information you can find behind scenes in movies, sometimes not so much. So my first one, I've got 4 here. One of mine that I had to put in this list, as we mentioned it before, was Glarp, the space monkey of 1998's Lost in Space movie. You got to hand it to them because they were doing some big, brave things. Like we said earlier, they're really pushing the bar, but the texturing and lighting was not quite there. In an interview that I saw with the VFX supervisor, they're talking about the villain at the end of the movie, and he literally says, he's like, he's at the time, this is like 98, 99 when he did this video. He's like, in computer graphics, light rays can't bounce or be soft. You can have a hard light here or a hard light there, and there's not a lot you can do with light. I'm thinking, oh gosh, like this is old.
Yeah.
Back before light simulation actually was like realistic. So they didn't have a lot to work with lighting, and really lighting is what makes things look real. And the lighting and the texturing they look flat. They look unreal. They don't look textured right. And this monkey is climbing all over the bodies, and it's a pretty dumb design to begin with. Like I kind of wish it just wasn't there at all in the movie, but they had to have the cute little animal. And if you want to get all like sexist about it, the girl gets the cute little pet animal, and the boy gets the killer robot. So I'm triggered.
My dishonorable mention was the first remake of the Hulk in the 2000. I would have to say this was
There's
probably
so
made
many.
like in 2003. It was
Yeah.
Ang Lee's Hulk, and if I'm not mistaken, it was Eric Bana's version of the Hulk. That
Not Bruce Banner.
not
I'm mixing up the
yeah,
names.
right. No, Eric Bana was the actor that played the Hulk. And
Mhm.
I remember just wanting it to be so good, and it was just so bad. Just everything about the texture of the Hulk was. I
Was
mean,
that the one where his dad can blend into matter, and he like becomes an all powerful being? Kind of. Is that the second
man,
movie?
I can't remember. They're all
They all blend
blending.
into one. I hate
Everything
that.
but
Like,
everything but Ed Norton's is. Well, man, you know what? You could even have a small argument for Ed Norton's one. Yeah, that first one. I think it was. I want to say it was released in like 2003, or the same era that we were talking about earlier. And that's my dishonorable mention. Was it just looked so bad? I mean, it looked like a walking green screen, and it goes back to that really bad texturing.
Mm-hmm.
of the character. The
Yeah, skin texturing has come a long way in CGI,
Mhm.
and it's there's even more to having a realistic humanoid or human with skin. It's not even just the bump map and the texture. That's just basically an image applied to a 3D mesh. That's what a texture is.
Mhm.
But now we've gone a whole new level in the past few years and adding subsurface light scattering.
Yes.
That is the effect where light goes through into the layer of the I guess epidermis
Mhm.
and bounces back and gives you orange hues based on light going through the skin material, which is like serious physics. There's an example. If you shine a bright flashlight behind someone's ear, you can see the light rays coming through, and it gives you this kind of weird orangey
Mhm.
red, hue because the skin. That's what it does. It blocks out all the light rays. It allows the warm colors to come through. And even just, if I have just, I'm looking at someone's face, I might not be able to pick it out consciously, but there is
Yeah, there's
subsurface
depth.
light
Yeah, there's
scattering.
depth to it. Right.
Yeah, there's depth through their skin because the skin is not a solid reflective surface. It's actually absorbent. Light can go into it maybe a few millimeters, and some light escapes out. And when you've got edge lighting and light coming around at a sharper angle, you can really tell the effect of
Mhm.
this effect. So all that to say, we every 10 years we find a new layer of realism to add. And they
Mhm.
didn't have, I don't believe they had anything close to subsurface light scattering skin technology at the time. So that was just one layer that they were missing to add realism.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we've mentioned several times in the podcast is uh, production decisions for whatever reason, expediency, budget, or whatever. Because
Hmm.
even this time frame that I'm talking about, 2002 to 2004, is when they released the Lord of the Rings, and
Mm.
the CGI and some of the Lord of the Rings stuff is amazing. But you go back
Oh
to
yeah,
what Peter Jackson, you go back to the behind the scenes and what they did. I mean, when they developed what at Digital Studios,
they took
I
their
mean,
time,
yeah,
man,
they took their
and put money into
time. Yeah, I
the
mean, they
research.
something like 30 layers of digital skin to create what you're talking about. You know, so it really,
My only visual effects complaint with the entire Lord of the Rings series is I think in the second movie there's a nighttime scene when they're at the large castle building
at
kingdom
Helm's
and
Deep. Uh-huh.
yeah, it's like nighttime and there's moonlight, and they did this weird skin smoothing effect that always makes me like I can't even focus because it's so visually distracting. I just wish I remember when and where
I think it
the
was
scenes
when
were.
on the elves. Was it on the elves when they
No,
came in?
it was on the humans and
Hmm.
some elves too, but there was a lot of humans involved, and just their skin. They did this weird beauty skin retouch smoothing effect that was trying to simulate moonlight, and it
Oh,
looks weird.
I don't
I didn't
remember
like it.
that, but yeah, I can see how that could. I
Other
mean,
than that,
it's
everything is
not.
perfect.
Yeah, it's yeah,
Considering. Cool.
yeah.
Well, my next dishonorable mention is when James Bond surfed down an Arctic wave in between glaciers to save the day. And this is on Die Another Day, 2002. Hey, there you go. 2002. That's like that danger area of CGI.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
thought anything was possible and that because they could, they should.
yeah.
That was their mistake. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Oh my gosh, that's horrible.
So James Bond, this is what's good. He's in the snow. He's in some kind of cool, James Bondy snowmobile. Literally snowmobiling away from a satellite laser from some Icarus satellite, shooting a killer laser beam down into the Arctic. So he's snowmobiling away, barely escapes. He's like on the edge of a cliff, and then he rips off like the back like hood or metal panel off the back of the snow ski, somehow surfs on that, and he grabs the like parachute out of the back of his little snowmobile too. So he's like kind of, I don't know, wind gliding with a parachute on his hands and surfing on a piece of metal. It's just over the top. Like, why? This is like anime level ridiculous, and it's in a James Bond movie. Definitely a low point. But it was pretty impressive that they even did it. Like some of the effects, while not good, it's like, wow, that's kind of a cool idea, and they tackled it pretty decently. But there's also some scenes where it just looks fake. It's just bad,
Mhm.
bad 3D models and green screen stuff going on.
I'm just gonna say this because it has to be said because I'm sure you'll get a ton of comments if it's not said.
Oh,
But
please.
my another dishonorable mention, and I'm just gonna just throw this out there, and it is what it is. Ryan Reynolds, Green Lantern.
Yeah.
It had
With his fake mask.
prior to its release had so much potential.
I love
And
Green Lantern. I was super stoked to see that
yes,
movie, and I was
me
like, oh.
too. And what happened? I, I think that was
Yeah.
actually the first foray for DC into to trying to create their extended universe, their cinematic universe. That was their first attempt, and it didn't work. It didn't go anywhere. I mean,
I love when Deadpool jokes about
oh
it.
my
Like, you give
gosh.
you suit. He says, "Is it animated?" So
Yeah.
funny.
Or even in spoilers here in Deadpool 2 when he when he goes back in time and starts to fix things, and
Oh yeah, what does he do to himself? What does he say?
Ryan Reynolds finishes the Green Lantern movie script. It's Ryan Reynolds in the movie playing himself, and he's finishing up the movie. He's like, "Yes, it's done." And Deadpool comes in and kills him. He kills him. He says, "No,
kills
that
Ryan
one."
Reynolds,
He
the
kills
actor.
Ryan Reynolds, the actor. He's like, "You're not
Oh
releasing
gosh,
that," or something like that.
what
So
the heck?
yeah,
That's
it's
friggin' hilarious.
um, I want to like it so bad, but I can't. I mean, I own it, and I want to like it, and it sits there, and I'm like, I'll watch it, and I'll be like, I can't. I just cry watching it.
Yeah, the Green Lantern is a corner of the DC universe that's one of my favorites because there's so many aliens and so much big galaxy space stuff going on, which is not that's more of a Marvel thing, you know.
Yeah.
There is space epic things, I guess, in the DC universe, but it's very Earth centric. I feel. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just feel like when you get into the Green Lantern comics, it's like, whoa, there's this huge universe out there of other Green Lanterns and the Green Lantern Corps and like different color rings. It's just wild.
Yeah.
And then the movie was like, well, they did some cool stuff. There were some cool scenes in there.
For a second there, DC started to revamp the DC universe with Justice League and Batman versus Superman and things like that. I think it was the Justice League that was the first one that had that new introduction at the beginning, kind of like how Marvel has their logo and they go through the comics and it kind of shuffles through the characters. Well, DC did that, and they had the characters that they'd already presented, which was the Flash, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Cyborg, Aquaman, and then they showed Green Lantern. And everybody got excited. It's like, oh my gosh, they're going to do it right this time. But nobody's ever since the bombing of Justice League, ever since the flop that was the Justice League. I don't want to say bombing too much. The flop that was the Justice League, it's pretty much been out of the news.
Yeah, it's too bad. I'd love to see them do it right.
Yeah. I don't know what they're going to do. I think they're going to go the whole multiverse theory because supposedly I heard a rumor Ryan Gosling is playing another Joker movie. Yeah, it's
so much.
I don't know what they're doing.
I'm getting Joker fatigue.
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah, it was our fourth Joker in so many years.
Joaquin's thing isn't even out. I've already got fatigue.
Yeah, Jared Leto, Joaquin Phoenix, Heath Ledger, Ryan Gosling.
He's too sexy to be Joker. It just doesn't make sense.
Is he?
He's too nice.
I don't know. He's going from space. He comes back from space, from landing on the moon, and goes nuts. He's the Joker now. It's Neil Armstrong turns into the Joker. Isn't that who he plays? Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin in the Spaceman? Yeah. Anyways,
First man.
Tangent. Yeah. So yeah, I had to mention the Green Lantern.
Thank you. We had to do it. All right, my last two is RoboCop. There in 1980s, RoboCop 1987. There is a scene where the villain, I believe it's one of the villains, he dies and he gets shot and falls out of a building and falls to his death. The arms are like so long on this puppet. I don't know who made this puppet, because if there's anyone else in the team that came into the room and saw this puppet that they used for the animation, if they didn't say, hey, your arms are like 50% too long, I don't know what's wrong with them, because it just looks so bad. Even if the arms were proportionate, the model is still bad looking and cringy and not photorealistic. Like, they've been doing people falling into blue screen pads for like years at that time. I don't know why they couldn't have done another one. Maybe because the actor was a little bit too old for that. I don't know.
I think, I've watched that clip after you mentioned it to me earlier. And I'm wondering if they weren't trying to do some sort of forced perspective, vertigo kind of look.
Yeah.
How like
it didn't work. Yeah, I know the warping on the edges of the frame. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that was the decision there, because it wasn't a low budget film. It wasn't like they were pressed for time for that movie or anything.
The movies are great. Yeah, I don't know. It's just such a bad puppet and bad animation piece. pretty awful. And then my last dishonorable mention is Spy Kids. All of it. All of them. Just
Boo
the
on you.
VFX. They didn't even try. It's terrible.
Well, it's because I think wasn't that Robert Rodriguez? Well, I think he did all of that on his own.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and he made the movies because his kids. So I'm defending it because he lives in Austin, and
Cool.
and yeah, he's a Texan. But yeah, they're horrible. But I think he made them because his kids wanted more of it, and so because he had made Mariachi and some of these other that movie with Antonio Banderas. Oh man, I can't remember. Anyways, he made a couple of big hits, and so he said, I'm gonna make some movies for my kids.
Yeah.
And so Spy Kids, and he also did Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
Oh.
Yeah, and so all of those are horrible, just shot in an airport hangar in Austin. I know the hangar that they shot them in.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, they are very bad, but I think they were supposed to be campy.
It's kind of like the Batman and Robin, where like it's a cartoon in live action form.
Yeah.
And it's for kids. It's not like they're not trying to be, Christopher Nolan or anything like that. But still, it's awful.
Yeah, it was.
It hurts to watch.
Yeah.
You have any others to add?
Polar Express, that was horrible.
Really?
It was
pretty good.
I thought it was one of those ones that I wanted to like it as well, but I couldn't get. I think the story was good and it was really neat, but it was just too creepy. It was one of those, like we talked about earlier in the episode. Everything looked too perfect.
Yeah,
it's like
too clean, too smooth.
Yeah, too smooth. I'm interested in knowing what year. Oh, there you go. Polar Express came out in 2004. It was on the back. It was on the back end of that exact.
Destined to fail.
Yeah.
Are there any good VFX movies in that time?
Oh man,
surely there are.
Oh well, here's one that was actually. I'm regressing here or digressing. Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow.
I want to see that.
That was
pretty
great.
Cool.
That was great. And what's interesting is it started out as a short film with a guy who did it literally on his laptop.
Nice.
That he made the pilot for it or the concept. And so what they did, I remember because I have it and I've watched it just a couple months ago. And I watched behind the scenes just to get inspired for film. If a guy can, do this on his laptop, I can do it on my laptop. Not this week though. I can't. Sky Captain: The World of Tomorrow the whole thing was shot on blue screen. The whole movie. Movie.
It was like 2000. I saw a number. It was like, how many shots was it? 2000 something?
It was some ridiculous number, but
all of them.
But yeah, it was kind of like a film noir. It was like a sepia noir movie. Yeah. It's really interesting. Yeah, I have it. I'll let you borrow it.
Yeah, I'd like to watch that. I when I was doing homework for this episode, I was looking at worst sequences in movies, worst CGI, things like that. That was actually on one of the lists. I was like, hey, come on,
as bad?
Yeah.
Well, it's obvious. It's obvious CGI, but it was
and it's early CGI, so it can only be so good.
Well, it wasn't supposed to be groundbreaking. It was just It was just using CGI, throwing actors into a CGI environment. It wasn't. It wasn't intended to be a CGI masterpiece. It was more like, look what we can do.
Hey, have you ever seen The 13th Floor?
Yes, I have seen 13th Floor. Everybody said
fool who has not seen that movie.
I thought it was really clever. The what is it? Simulation within a simulation, or the simulation creating a simulation, right?
Hey, don't ruin it.
Oh, sorry.
Spoiler. Forget about that and go watch the movie.
Yeah, don't watch. Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember that movie. It was great. That was a really fantastic movie. I watched it. There's that movie. There's The Matrix, and another one with Jude Law that a lot of people forget about. It's called Existenz.
Never heard of it.
Existenz is another simulation movie at the same time about what is real. Like, is the simulation real or is reality real? It's the same concept. I think Matrix came out, Existenz came out a little bit after that, and then 13th Floor was also out. But I think, generally speaking, they were all in development at the same time.
Awesome. Well, if you guys, listeners out there, have any additions to this episode, we'd love to see your comments. You can find the post for this episode on the Facebook page. of Visionary Variety Podcast. And we'd love to know what, in your opinion, what are some of the worst visual effects? And thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the Visionary Variety Podcast. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so that you won't miss any of the future episodes. You can also find our previous episodes there and listen whenever you want. We love to hear from our listeners, so if you've got any comments or suggestions for a future episode, you can always reach us at tvvpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again and have a great week.
Lilo and Stitch came out in 2002.
Oh, that's a great movie. Love it. Although the women are a little uncomfortably curvy in that movie. I mean, dang.
Die another day.
Whoa, girl. Sheesh.